What if one of the funniest speeches on the Senate floor is not really about comedy at all, but about the invisible people who keep power from collapsing into chaos? In this unexpectedly revealing moment, Senator John Kennedy steps up to praise a departing staffer named Tony Hanagan, and what begins like a lighthearted farewell slowly turns into something deeper. Between the jokes, the applause, and the laughter, Kennedy opens a small door into the hidden machinery of Washington. The people behind the curtain, the advisors in the cloakroom, the staff who understand the rules no one else truly does. And for a few rare minutes, the Senate stops performing power and starts revealing how it actually survives.
Mr. President, I'm going to give you a name. Tony Hanagan. As we all know, not necessarily everybody outside this chamber, Tony is a senior floor assistant. Now, I'll come back to what that means in a second. Tony is leaving us for the private sector. Under the ethics rules, he can't tell us where he's going. I think it's a startup, but I'm not sure. I think part of his job responsibilities, not exclusive because I don't know, because he can't talk about it, will be, quote, congressional relations. I have strongly encouraged him to ask the startup to define very carefully what they mean by congressional relations in light of what's been going on around here. Though we kid him a lot, I'll come back to that too. Tony's very, very smart. He's a graduate of William and Mary. I'm sure there are some dummies at William and Mary, but I've never met one coming out of there. It's a great school. He's also spent time at the Wharton School studying their model budget project. He has worked his way up as a member of basically a Senate advisor. And let me explain a little bit what Tony and his colleagues do. You see these two doors back here, this one and this one. This one leads to what we call the Democratic cloakroom. This door leads to what we call the Republican cloakroom. Now, that's where senators go to cuss and to tell each other lies. But it's not the only purpose of those. Supposedly we can go back there and relax, and when someone isn't around, and sometimes when they are around, make fun of people. But there are members of our staff who have desks back there. And not every member of our staff has a desk back there. Some are close by. What do? They make this place run. For one thing, they understand the rules, or claim to. No living human being, at least not in the United States Senate, with a beating heart understands the Senate rules. I'm not saying no one understands them. I'm just saying nobody in the Senate does. They say they do. They lie like fish swim. Because to understand, you don't only have to understand the rules, you've got to understand all the precedents. The first 6 months I got here, I said, I'm going to learn the rules. I'd read about Lyndon Johnson, who supposedly sat here and learned all the rules and outsmarted all his colleagues. I don't believe that. But anyway, he probably knew more than I did. God rest his soul. But after 6 months, here's what was my conclusion. I don't know if I can learn the rules and all the precedents, and by the time I do, they won't have changed. And someday I'm going to die, and I don't want on my tombstone, Kennedy understood the Senate rules. So I gave up. I quit. No mas. And so now when I want to understand the rules, I talk to a member of our staff like Tony or some of my colleagues. And so do most of my Senate colleagues on the Democratic side and the Republican side. Now, our staff could be lying to us because we don't know any better. They could make this stuff up, but I don't think they do. I've never seen Tony make it up. A couple of times I thought I'd caught him, but he turned out to be right. And that's important. But it's more than just understanding the rules. That's more than Tony's job and my colleagues' job, who are our advisors. It's more than just learning the rules. Because the rules look like they were designed by a heroin addict with a socket wrench. We don't know how to get things done. So we go to our advisors and say, tell me how to do this. And they're really good at that. Tony's really good at that. And I know sometimes the questions are so esoteric and so bizarre. I can tell from their eyes that they want to look at you and say, you're not the stupidest person I've ever met, but you better hope the stupidest person I've ever met doesn't die. But they never do that. They always say, okay, you know, you can try it that way, but here's the downside of it. And with all due respect, there's a better way of doing it. And you might consider this. And frankly, I mean, our parliamentarian, I see her here, she does understand the rules, and she's pretty good at helping you too. Now, she's got lines she can't cross, but because she doesn't work for Senate, for Republicans or Democrats, but this is what Tony does and the other staff members. And they make this place run. They're not responsible for the fact that the Senate only works when everybody isn't crazy at the same time. And they're not responsible for the fact that sometimes it takes us weeks, months, even years to get nothing done. Doing nothing, it can be frustrating. Doing nothing is very hard because you never know when you're finished. But they make this place run. And we're going to miss Tony. Now, we make fun of Tony. It's all in good fun. We used to, there's a big mirror back in the cloakroom, I think it's an antique mirror, that's what they tell us. And sometimes I've done it, but others I think have too. Sometimes we'll write little notes to the majority leader. We used to do it with Mitch, and now we do it sometimes with Thune, and sign it Tony. And of course, they all have a heart attack. Tony keeps a couple of pairs of shoes under his desk. And probably about once a week, some of us take at least one of the shoes and hide it. And he's ready to go home at whatever, 11 o'clock, midnight, and he can't find his shoe. And Max, who works with him back there, Max is his job is to eventually, after he spends an inordinate amount of time and gets really close to the point that he has no more fire trucks to give and is going to start telling everybody what he thinks. Max will tell him where the shoe is. I've got some other stories about Tony, but I just can't tell them because there are probably some children listening. But anyway, you will read about Tony someday in the Wall Street Journal. And it won't be because he went Eric Swalwell. It will be because of his financial success. And we're going to miss him. But I can't blame him. He's already picking out the color of his new Mercedes. You know Mercedes-Benz, Mr. President, if you've got any advice for him, like the best one that deflects heat, you might want to talk to him. He may want to just buy two, okay? But anyway, we're going to miss Tony, and I wanted to say that, and I'm sorry I can't tell you all the Tony stories. They are legendary, but Tony, you've just been awesome. And you and all your colleagues, we never talk about them enough. And I just want to thank you. And my final words, peace out. Thank you.
By the end of this speech, what first sounded like a playful farewell becomes something much richer, a portrait of the hidden architecture of power. Senator John Kennedy is speaking about one man, Tony Hanagan, a senior floor assistant leaving the Senate for the private sector. But the longer he talks, the more the story stops being about one staffer and starts becoming a quiet documentary about how institutions really function. Not in civics textbooks, not in campaign slogans, and not in the polished language of official speeches, but in the strange, crowded human backstage where exhausted people, odd routines, procedural experts, and private jokes keep a monumental system moving one day at a time. That is what gives this clip its weight. Kennedy begins with humor, and the humor works immediately. He teases the ethics rules that prevent Tony from saying where he is going. He jokes about congressional relations. He pokes fun at Senate culture with the kind of dry timing that makes the room relax. But then something more interesting happens. Through that comedy, he starts explaining what staff like Tony actually do. He points to the cloakrooms. He talks about the advisors who sit behind the scenes. He describes the people senators rely on when the rules are too tangled, too old, too obscure, or too absurd for the lawmakers themselves to navigate alone. And just like that, the speech stops being a comedy bit and becomes a rare act of institutional honesty. Because what Kennedy is really admitting is simple. The visible figures of government are often standing on a foundation built by invisible ones. The senators speak, vote, posture, and debate under the lights. But behind them are staffers who understand procedure, timing, consequences, strategy, and the 1,000 tiny decisions that prevent the place from falling apart. Kennedy makes that point in the only way this speech could really land, through humor. He says no living human being in the Senate truly understands the rules. He describes them as something so convoluted, they look like they were designed by a heroin addict with a socket wrench. That line gets a laugh, but it also tells the viewer something real. Institutions this old are not held together by elegance. They are held together by memory, precedent, adaptation, and people who know how to maneuver through complexity without making it look dramatic. That is the hidden labor of governance, and this clip briefly shines a light on it. What makes the moment so engaging is that Kennedy never lectures. He lets the culture reveal itself through stories. He talks about how senators go into the cloakrooms to relax, complain, cuss, tell lies, make fun of one another, and hide from the formality of the chamber. He admits that lawmakers lean on staff because the system is too strange, too procedural, too layered to master casually. He jokes that perhaps the staff are lying to the senators because the senators do not know any better. And in saying all of this, he gives the audience something Washington almost never gives clearly. Texture, not policy, not outrage. Texture, the feel of the place, the rhythm of it, the absurdity of it. The dependence of powerful people on less visible experts who quietly keep events from spinning into confusion. Then the speech shifts again, and this is where it gains warmth. Kennedy starts talking not just about Tony's skill, but about Tony as part of the chamber's daily emotional life. The jokes about hiding his shoe, the notes signed with his name, the teasing in the cloakroom. All of these details matter because they humanize a building most people only experience as theater. The Senate, in public imagination, is grand, historic, ideological, and distant. But here it becomes personal, messy, and familiar. It becomes a workplace, a weird one, yes, but still a workplace, full of rituals, nicknames, practical jokes, late nights, and relationships built through repetition and pressure. That is why this video has real documentary value. It strips status away from the institution, just enough for the audience to see its human skeleton. And once viewers see that, they stay, because they are no longer just hearing a speech. They are getting access to a culture. Another reason this clip holds attention so well is that Kennedy's comedy is never only comedy. Almost every joke contains a second layer. When he says the Senate only works when everybody is not crazy at the same time, he gets a laugh, but he also offers a brutally efficient summary of legislative dysfunction. When he says it can take weeks, months, even years to get nothing done, the line is funny because it is painfully recognizable. And when he says doing nothing is hard because you never know when you're finished, that joke lands because it turns the Senate's paralysis into something both ridiculous and revealing. This is important for your narration style. You should not treat those lines as random punchlines. They are the soul of the clip. They allow the audience to enjoy the speech on the surface while also absorbing a more serious truth underneath. Institutions often survive not because they are rational, but because enough capable people learn how to live inside their irrationality. And that is exactly what Tony and people like him represent here. They are interpreters of the maze. They are the shock absorbers between ambition and procedure, personality and precedent, ego and reality. Kennedy's closing stretch deepens that feeling even more. He says the legendary stories about Tony are not all repeatable, that one day people will probably read about him in the Wall Street Journal, and not because he went Eric Swalwell, but because of his financial success. The line is mischievous, but what follows is sincere. Kennedy makes clear that Tony will be missed, not in the formal, disposable language of political courtesy, but in the tone people use when someone was genuinely part of the rhythm of the place. And when he finishes with a simple, almost comically casual, "peace out," the speech ends in exactly the right register: affectionate, offbeat, and human. That ending matters because it refuses to become self-important. It reminds the audience that the strength of the moment was never grandeur. It was recognition. Recognition of people who rarely get a microphone, whose names are not on campaign signs, and whose work is usually hidden behind the reputations of elected officials. So the larger story this clip tells is not only that John Kennedy can be funny, it is that beneath the spectacle of politics lies an entire ecosystem of unseen labor, private expertise, and personal loyalty, without which the public institution would struggle to function at all. And that is what makes this such a strong, high-retention documentary moment. It starts as entertainment, opens into insight, and ends with respect. It gives the audience laughter, but also access. It reveals that even in one of the most formal chambers in American government, the real continuity of power often rests not with the people making the speeches, but with the people quietly helping them understand what to do next. In the end, this is a tribute not just to Tony Hanagan, but to every invisible operator inside a visible institution. Every person whose name the public may never know, but whose absence would be felt the moment the machinery started to fail. And maybe that is why this clip resonates so strongly. Because for a few minutes, the Senate is not speaking as an institution. It is speaking as a workplace, as a culture, and as a human system held together by the very people history usually leaves out.